We're picking up at the end of the chapter Horcruxes, which is chapter 23. And we are about 33, so 2, 4, 1, 508. Somewhere around 505, I believe. Yeah, maybe a little bit more than that, 506, where Harry has just asked Dumbledore if Voldemort knows when a Horcrux is destroyed. Can he feel it? Dumbledore says, I believe not. Then they keep talking. Next long paragraph, Dumbledore talks about Lucius didn't know what the diary really was. Okay? Which kind of helps explain why Voldemort is so angry at Malfoy at the end of book 4 when all the Death Eaters apparate around him. Okay? And also possibly explains why Dumbledore says, I think it is in here, that he's probably better off in Azkaban than he would be if he were out in the open, talking about Malfoy. And that's what he says at the end of that paragraph. So, Harry asks, if all his Horcruxes are destroyed, Voldemort could be killed. Dumbledore, I think so. But, he says at the end of that paragraph, it will take uncommon skill and power, okay, to kill a wizard like Voldemort, even without his Horcruxes. Harry replies, I haven't got uncommon skill and power. Dumbledore says, yes, you do. Okay? At the end of book 5, when Sirius died, or after Sirius died, and Harry had his conversation with Dumbledore, Dumbledore points out Harry has something that Voldemort knows absolutely nothing of. Love. His ability to love. He says, it's that ability to love that saved you from Voldemort / Nagini, okay, back at the Ministry. So Harry says, I know, love, big deal. Yes, Harry, you can love, said Dumbledore, who looked as though he knew perfectly well what Harry had just refrained from saying. Because he does, because he's a Legobans, which, given everything that has happened to you, is a great and remarkable thing. You're still too young to understand how unusual you are. Notice Dumbledore tells him, you're too young to understand. Okay? So when the prophecy says, I'll have the power, it just means love. Yes, just love. Harry, never forget what the prophecy says. And this is the important part. It's not the part about love. Well, the part about love is important. This is the really important part. And this, what Dumbledore is getting to now, is what it takes Harry almost all of book 7 to really ultimately accept. Okay? Never forget that what the prophecy says is only significant because Voldemort made it so. Okay? He didn't accept that at the end of book 5 when Dumbledore said Voldemort made a choice. I told you this at the end of last year, book 5. Voldemort singled you out as the person who would be most dangerous to him, and in doing so, he made you the person that would be most dangerous. What does that mean? Did it have to be Harry? No. Could it have been Neville? Yes. Okay. But it comes to the same. Notice Harry doesn't finish his thought. Dumbledore, no, it doesn't. Exclamation mark. Why? Dumbledore's not leaving any room for discussion. He's not leaving any room for doubt. He's being utterly emphatic. It doesn't. You are setting too much store by the prophecy. What does he mean by that?
Harry is thinking that everything that is going to occur has occurred is because of that prophecy. But in reality, it's not.
Harry's thinking the prophecy is what?
Hard truth.
Okay. What's another word that describes it? Fate. Fate. There's no escaping this, or destiny. There's nothing he can do about it. Right? But you said the prophecy means, if Voldemort had never heard of the prophecy, would it have been fulfilled? See, this is what Dumbledore's trying to get Harry to realize. Would it have meant anything? It's the age-old philosophical question. If a tree falls in the forest and there's no one there to hear it, does it make a sound? Sound only occurs, theoretically, when there's a receptor. That is, when there is something that receives those waves that turns it somewhere in a brain, in a computer, into what is perceived as sound. Okay? So, of course not. If Voldemort had never heard the prophecy would be absolutely meaningless. Right? If you had never picked up this book or seen the film, what would the book or film mean to you?
Absolutely nothing.
Like every other book and film you've never seen. Just let that kind of sit there and sink in for a bit. Okay? Do you think every prophecy in the Hall of Prophecy has been fulfilled? But, Harry's still clinging to that old idea. Why? It gives him some kind of stability. It gives him something to hold on to. What's the stability? What's the thing he wants/needs to hold on to? I'm going to channel, Inigo Montoya from Princess Bride. If you're not familiar with the film, you need to go watch it. It's one of the greatest films in history. Okay? No matter what you think of this guy, Ted Cruz has the entire film memorized. I mean, he'll just start spouting off random lines. Very strange. Anyways, Inigo Montoya is a guy whose entire life is dominated by one goal. Anybody know what it is?
Kill the man who killed his father.
To kill the six-fingered man who killed his father. And when he finally gets the opportunity, you killed my father, prepare to die. And then we go through this long battle. Harry's entire life, since he discovered what Voldemort's kind of purpose was, has been what?
Kill the man who killed his father.
Revenge. Right? It's one of the reasons a lot of the Christians who came out of the woodwork didn't like the idea of the books. It's all about revenge. Where's the Christian charity? Where's forgiveness? Where's turn the other cheek kind of a thing? Okay? What did Harry tell Dumbledore when they got to the Weasley's house, to the Burrow, when Dumbledore drops him off? I decided after Sirius's death, it's not enough just to dwell on the past. So, when I take out Voldemort, I'm going to take out as many Death Eaters as I can. And Dumbledore's like, way to go, Harry. Spoken like a true son of James and godson of Sirius. Last year, you said one of us would have to kill the other. Okay? Look at Dumbledore's response. It takes Harry a couple of pages for this to sink in. I don't mean sink in that he totally accepts it. He's starting to. Dumbledore. Harry, come on. Listen to me, son. Wake up. Only because Voldemort made a grave error and acted on Trelawney's words. If Voldemort had never done something, then Harry would be what to Voldemort? Like the books you've never written. Totally meaningless. Okay? And books you've never read, well, as well as ones you've never written. If Voldemort had never murdered your father, would he have imparted in you a furious desire for revenge? Of course not. How many mass murderers are there out in the world right now that you want revenge against? Probably none. How many mass murderers are there out in the world right now? Probably more than a few. But we have no idea who they are. Why? They haven't affected us personally. If he had not forced your mother to die for you, would he have given you a magical protection he could not penetrate? Notice, it's not just one action on Voldemort's part, it's multiple actions. Of course not. Harry, don't you see? Voldemort created his worst enemy. And then Rowling extrapolates. Why? Because I think she's trying to make a larger point. It's not just about Harry and Voldemort. Just as tyrants everywhere do. Notice, tyrants everywhere, Rowling suggests, do what? They create their enemies. Not intentionally. Have you any idea how much tyrants fear the people they oppress? How many people live in China? How many Chinese are there? 1.2 billion. You know how many of those 1.2 billion are members of the Chinese Communist Party, which is the party that dominates society? It's not just the government, all right? All the members of the Communist Party in China are less than 100 million out of 1.2 billion. How do they keep control? Fear. I don't know if you saw it a couple of weeks ago, back in October, I guess. At the annual meeting, the 5-year meeting of the Chinese Communist Party, where President Xi was elected to a new 5-year term, which is essentially for him, because this is the third one. He had the Constitution changed, president for life, emperor, for lack of a better word. Anybody know what he did to the previous president? He didn't kill, but there's a fantastic if you're on the outside, not so fantastic if you're the previous president. The previous president's sitting there, he's like 78 or so, and he's sitting there, and all of a sudden these 3 or 4 guys come in. This is during the televised meeting, all right? All the TVs in China have this on, okay? And these guys come up and they kind of gently grab him by the elbows and they speak to him. And he looks to Xi, who's just sitting there. You know, his nickname's Winnie the Pooh because he looks like Winnie the Pooh. And Pooh's sitting there looking forward. And the guy kind of reached up and he just kind of looks at him, says a couple words, and the guy's escorted out and he hasn't been seen since. Why did he do that? Power. That's his asserting. You no longer count. I am the state, okay? He creates his own enemies. Why does, Kim Jong-il in North Korea, why is he very seldom seen out among masses of people? Why doesn't he travel around the world? Because he's deathly afraid of being assassinated. Why has Putin not left Moscow in the last year? He's afraid of being assassinated. All of them realize that one day, amongst their many victims, there is sure to be one who rises against them and strikes back. Right? It takes what? It takes one person with a rifle. Always. Voldemort is no different. Always he was on the lookout for the one who would challenge him. He heard the prophecy, he leapt into action, With the result, he not only had picked the man most likely to finish him, notice, not the boy, the man, okay? He handed him uniquely deadly weapons. What's Dumbledore's point? If he hadn't acted based on what?
The word safe.
Based on the prophecy, how much of which was heard?
Half of it.
Part of it. How was it heard? Eavesdropping. He wouldn't have created his enemy. But everything Dumbledore says, but why? Harry's mind is still closed. He's not opening up to what his headmaster is attempting to teach him. It is essential that you understand this. Why? Book 7. Harry has to understand this in order to accept what he's going to have to see towards the end of book 7. Okay? By attempting to kill you, Voldemort himself singled out the remarkable person who sits here in front of me, gave him the tools for the job. It's Voldemort's fault that you were able to see into his thoughts, his ambitions, that you even understand the snake-like language in which he gives orders. Why? Because Voldemort transferred some of his powers, Dumbledore said at the end of book 2, which Harry interpreted as, he put a bit of himself into me. Notice how more accurate Harry's description is than Dumbledore's. Because, since we're going into book 7 today, what did Voldemort put into Harry?
Part of the soul.
A part of himself, a part of his soul. It wasn't just transferring powers. Okay? So, and yet, Harry, despite your privileged insight into Voldemort's world, which, by the way, is a gift any Death Eater would kill to have. Really, I mean, think Bellatrix. You've never been seduced by the dark arts. Never, even for a second, shown the slightest desire to become one of Voldemort's followers. Maybe this is the explanation for why Harry, at the end of book 1, says, I'll never join the dark side. Remember when we talked about that? Before they go through the trap door, he's talking with Ron and Hermione, and he says, I'll just have to wait for my death a little longer at the Dursleys because I'm never going over to the dark side. And I pointed out, where has he been asked to? This, and what we find out in book 7, might be the solution to that. It might be that there's that little tiny bit of Voldemort in him that's kind of saying, maybe you should. Maybe it's that, what is in Harry, that causes the Sorting Hat to say, ooh, kid, boy, would you do well in Slytherin. Why? Well, part of him is Slytherin's heir, when you think about it. He doesn't know that. So, Harry, of course I haven't. Why? He killed my mom and dad. You are protected, in short, by your ability to love. Notice, he killed my mom and dad. That could be interpreted, and I want revenge. You killed my father, prepared to die, you know. Or it could be Harry's love for his parents is what protects him. That's the way Dumbledore interprets it. The only protection that can possibly work against the lure of power like Voldemort's. Notice, love is the only counter to, what does he say? The lure of power, the desire of power, the temptation of power. Because what I've said, you may not agree, what is love ultimately always about? It's not about the self. It's about the other. Power ultimately is always about what I want, what I get, what I have. In spite of all the temptation you have endured, all the suffering, right? Where's the suffering come from? Partially from the Dursleys. All the temptation, all the suffering, you remain pure of heart. Kind of interesting that she says that. Rowling puts it in Dumbledore's mouth. Because pure of heart implies kind of sinless. All right? Just as pure as you were at the age of 11 when you stared into a mirror that reflected your heart's desire, and it showed you only the way to thwart Lord Voldemort. That is, the last time he looked into the mirror. Because each of the other times he looked into the mirror, what did he see? Himself surrounded by his family. And I don't know that J.K. Rowling meant this. Oh, what chapter is it? I think it's 12. Hebrews 12. Where St. Paul writes about this great cloud of witnesses. He's talking about all those who died before, who looked for Christ, etc., etc. Okay? Well, here he is, his own great cloud of witnesses, his family. And notice when he looks into that mirror and he sees his heart's desire, the way I interpret it, you don't have to, is what? How can he be with all of his family? Only by dying. Harry, have you any idea how few wizards could have seen what you saw in the mirror? Now he's talking about when you looked in the mirror and you saw yourself getting the Sorcerer's Stone and it drops into your pocket. Why? His heart's desire then, stop Voldemort. Voldemort should have known then what he was dealing with, but he did not. But now he knows. Why? You flitted into Voldemort's mind without damage to yourself. But he cannot possess you without enduring, notice, mortal agony. What does his name mean? Voldemort's. To fly or flee from death, mortality. And when he tries to possess Harry, the agony is killing him. Okay? I do not think he understands why, Harry. But he was in such a hurry to mutilate his own soul, he never paused to understand the incomparable power of a soul that is untarnished and whole. Why? What have we been told a soul is supposed to be? Whole, complete, perfect. And we're going to hear more about that in the next book. But I mean, that's a pretty good speech Dumbledore's just given, right? You would think most kids would go, oh, wow, and Harry's, but it all comes down to the same thing. I've got to try and kill him. And Dumbledore latches on those two words that I emphasized. Got to? Of course you've got to. But not because of the prophecy. See, Harry's thinking it's because of the prophecy. So he says, no, but because you won't rest until you've tried. He says, just stop right now, Harry. Think about it. If you'd never heard of the prophecy, how would you feel about Voldemort? And Harry's like, and before he speaks, look at the description. Harry watched Dumbledore striding up and down in front of him and thought, why is Dumbledore striding up and down? What is it? When somebody's doing this, what does it indicate? It's nervous energy. Why? Because Dumbledore's, it's almost like, if I could just imperious the damn kid and put the ideas in his mind, I need him to understand. But he can't, because that's taking away his free will. So he's pacing, and Harry's sitting, and he's thinking. He thinks of his father, thinks of his mother. He thinks of his father. He thinks of Sirius. He thinks of Cedric. Later on, book 7, he's going to see his mother, his father, Cedric, Sirius, Dumbledore, all falling, dying. Okay? Those, by the way, some of them are the nameless faces that Dumbledore alluded to when he talked about his flaw in book 5, the flaw in his plan, that he loved Harry too much, so that he didn't care about the nameless, faceless persons who might die in the future. Who were some of those nameless, faceless persons? Bertha Jorkins, Frank Price, Sirius Black, Cedric. Should I start naming book 7 people? He thought of all the terrible deeds he knew Lord Voldemort had done. A flame seemed to leap inside his chest, searing his throat. What's the flame? And notice, it's inside his chest. It's ardor, which is another word for love. Okay? Not romantic, not erotic, fellowship, friendship, and possibly even divine kind of love. Sacred love. Okay? And Harry thinks, I'd want him finished. What does Frodo say to Gandalf about the ring? It's reverse order of this. I do really want to destroy it, or to have it destroyed. I'd want him finished. Notice that's passive voice. Dumbledore, you take care of it. Hagrid, you take care of it. Moody, and I'd want to do it. Why? Not because of the prophecy, but because of what? What has Harry repeatedly been doing? We've seen this from book 1 all the way forward. For other people.
Saving them, I guess.
Helping them, saving them, protecting them. Right? Even his enemies. Well, what are we going to see in book 7?
He protects Draco again.
He protects Draco. He not only protects Draco, he does what? He saves Draco's life. Okay? Harry becomes literally Patronus Potter. How? I mean, I've got chill bumps. It's going up now. Jump to the end of book 7. What does he willingly do? He walks into the Forbidden Forest. Okay? So, Dumbledore, of course you would. You see, the prophecy does not mean, and this is one of the examples I think of, when I say, Rowling's not a great writer, but man, is she a good storyteller. This is utterly out of this world, good storytelling. Okay? You see, the prophecy does not mean you have to do anything, but the prophecy caused Voldemort to mark you as his equal. See, Harry doesn't think of himself as Voldemort's equal. I mean, you put a set of scale, a set of balances, put Voldemort on one and Harry on the other, perfectly balanced, Dumbledore's saying. Even though Voldemort, we know, has all kinds of dark magic. In other words, you are free to choose your way, quite free to turn your back on the prophecy. You could say, no, I'm not going to do it. But, now Dumbledore gets to say a but. Voldemort continues to set store by the prophecy. He will continue to hunt you down, which makes it certain, really, that one of us is going to end up killing the other. Yes. And now, look at this paragraph. But he understood at last what Dumbledore had been trying to tell him. Okay, this is an initial understanding. This is an intellectual understanding. Okay? What Harry's got to do in book 7 is he's got to go beyond the intellectual understanding to what? He's got to feel it in his bones. He's got to have the belief kind of understanding, where it's no longer just reasoned through, but now it becomes part of the very fiber of his being. Okay? It was, he thought. So the narrator tells us exactly what Harry thinks. The difference between being dragged into the arena to face a battle to the death and walking into the arena with your head held high. Why does she use this image, and where does it come from?
Does it have something to do with old Rome and the Colosseum and all that?
Bingo. 100% right. It's the Roman Colosseum. Who were taken into the Roman Colosseum to fight gladiators?
Would it have been prisoners?
Slaves, prisoners,
People shunted to the bottom of society?
people shunted to the bottom. Not so much. I mean, peasants usually weren't. And that's not just everyday ordinary slaves. Okay. The greatest number? Christians. We've got all kinds of accounts of Christians who were, during the various persecutions that went on for the first 300 years of the Christian church, various accounts of various people known by name who were taken in, and some of them were dragged, kicking and screaming, and some of them recanted their faith. They still died. I mean, they were still thrown to the lions and the gladiators and such. But there are many accounts of people who literally walked in, head held high, chest thrust out, and said, "Take me." In other words, they were prepared. Kind of like what we saw without his really understanding this, what Harry do in book 4, right? He hides behind the tombstone and he says, "I'm not going to die cowering behind a tombstone. I'm going to stand up and face death like a man," I think is what the words he says are. Some people perhaps would say there was little to choose between the two ways. What are the two ways? He's talking about the two ways of dying, or he's thinking about the two ways of dying. One, nearly headless Nick. The other, Sirius Black. Right? Why does Nick say Sirius won't come back? He will have gone on. Why? Into book 1. Sirius's mind is well organized. He's prepared. James and Lily, they were prepared. Peter Pettigrew? What do you think?
At the bare minimum, not as much as the others.
Not as much as the others. Okay? He's had time to prepare. Some would say there's little to choose between the two ways. Why? What's the outcome?
You're dead either.
No matter what, you're dead. Okay? Who has that attitude? Voldemort. For Voldemort, the very fact of death, that's the fact he won't do what? He won't face. He won't confront his own mortality, meaning he's not prepared. His mind is not well organized, obviously, because he's a psychopath, okay? But Dumbledore knew, and so do I, thought Harry, with a rush of fierce pride, and so did my parents. Notice, how did James die?
Trying to hold him off from Lily and Harry.
Okay? Get more specific. How did James die? Was he holding one of these? He died wandless, defenseless, and yet he still tried. Did he have a chance? None. Absolutely none. But he still moved towards death. Okay? in the person of Voldemort. Lily, she had a choice. Marape, she had a choice. Okay? I've got written in here, the most important chapter. At least up to this point. All right? And I wrote down here, and this is again, I wrote this before book 7 came out. So if Lord Voldemort transferred powers to Harry, does Harry have to die for Lord Voldemort to fully die? Notice, neither can live while the other survives, is what the prophecy says. So if there's a bit of Voldemort in Harry, doesn't Harry have to die so that that bit of Voldemort can also die? Is Harry Potter, and again, I wrote this before book 7 came out, an unintentional Horcrux? What did Dumbledore say Voldemort intended to do? He intended to create how many Horcruxes? He intended to split his soul into 7. 6 Horcruxes. Right? Because the 7th piece would remain in himself. That doesn't jive with what is said here, though. If we were to go back through the chapter where they're talking about Horcruxes and go through and list all of them, okay, what's the first one we know of?
The diary.
Diary. Second one?
The ring,
The ring. Those 2, gone. Third,
the locket,
that's mentioned. Locket. 4,
Something of Gryffindor or Ravenclaws.
I can't even.
cup.
Yeah.
Hufflepuff's cup. We know about that. And then the other 2 are unknown, but we think they're going to be relics of the other founders in some way. All right? What do they turn out to be?
Ravenclaw's diadem.
Yeah.
And then the snake on Jean.
So when was Nagini made of? Because Dumbledore says in that chapter that he thinks Voldemort intended to do what? To make another Horcrux when he killed Harry. So was that when he was going to make Nagini a Horcrux? Because what do we discover?
There's the 7th one.
If he was going to make another one with Harry's death, then that would make 7 plus the 1 in him. So there's something wrong with the numerology, let's say. Let's put
Unless
it.
he didn't make Nagini until he came back.
Yeah, possibly.
You had Nagini with the book 4.
Pardon?
You had Nagini with the book 4.
Yeah, at the beginning, because Nagini gets to eat Frank Bryce, okay? Again, problem. Okay, Sectum Sempra, we're going to go through very quickly. Again, what do we see happen? Harry starts eavesdropping. He's spying on Malfoy, page 521 in your book, talking to Moaning Myrtle. And Malfoy's crying. No one can help me. His whole body's shaking. I can't do it. I can't. It won't work unless I do it soon. He says he'll kill me. And Harry realized with a shock so huge it seemed to root him to the spot. Malfoy was crying, actually crying, gulping. And then he looks in the mirror and he sees Harry. And Malfoy and Harry, Sectum Sempra. What's Sectum Sempra?
It causes
Slashing motion, it's like a knife across the chest. And Malfoy falls to the ground, bleeding horribly, okay? Moaning Myrtle cries out, murder in the bathroom, etc., etc. Harry sees the broken vanishing cabinet. I'm skipping a bunch. he and Ron and Hermione talk about the spell he used. Go to the seer overheard. Okay? Harry talks with chapter 25, about 542 or so. He talks with Trelawney. Trelawney says, the lightning struck tower, calamity, disaster, coming nearer all the time. Harry's like, well, okay. You know, she's gone off on another one of her. She says, Dumbledore doesn't want to see me. I think there's possibly an implication that Dumbledore has heard about the lightning struck tower. Okay? But doesn't pay attention to it, so to speak. They keep talking, and she mentions around 5:44, 5:45, she gives Harry information he never was supposed to hear. There's a commotion outside the door. We were rudely interrupted by Severus Snape. What? She's talking about when she was talking to Dumbledore, interviewing for the job. There was a commotion outside the door. It flew open. There was that rather uncouth barman standing with Snape. Who is that rather uncouth barman? It's Aberforth, who was waffling about having come the wrong way up the stairs, although I'm afraid I myself rather thought he had been apprehended eavesdropping on my interview with Dumbledore. You see, he himself was seeking a job at the time. She, Trelawney, interviewed for the position of divination the same time Snape interviewed for what? Defense against the dark arts. Well, after that, Dumbledore seemed much more disposed to give me the job. Why? Because unbeknownst to her, she delivered a prophecy during the interview. Did Dumbledore know this was going to happen? I don't think so. Okay? And she keeps talking, and she's like, Harry, and Harry's not responding. It's almost like Harry's gone into catatonic shock. It was Snape who had overheard the prophecy. It was Snape who carried the news of the prophecy to Voldemort. Snape and Peter Pettigrew together had sent Voldemort hunting after Lily and James and their son. Okay? So, Harry goes off with Dumbledore, or is about to go off to Dumbledore. Dumbledore is talking about there's another Horcrux hidden in a cave, etc. Towards the bottom of that page, 547 or so probably, Harry says, Dumbledore asks, what's upset you? Nothing, no, not upset. Harry, you were never a good occlumencer. Notice, Dumbledore knows what has upset him. He's kind of forcing Harry to say it. Snape. Notice he doesn't say Professor Snape. Snape's what's happened. He told Voldemort about the prophecy. It was him. Dumbledore's expression did not change, but Harry thought his face whitened under the bloody tinge cast by the setting sun. When did you find this out? Just now. And you let him, and notice now he's yelling. Top of his lungs. You let him teach here. He told Voldemort to go after my mom and dad. Dumbledore explains. Snape made a terrible mistake. He was sorry for it afterwards. Okay, page 549. Harry, he hated my dad like he hated Sirius. Haven't you noticed how the people Snape hates tend to end up dead? You have no idea of the remorse Professor Snape felt. Okay, Harry, but he's a good occlumencer, isn't he? If he can keep Voldemort from seeing the truth, can't he keep Dumbledore from seeing the truth too? I mean, that's Harry's point. Dumbledore finishes. I am sure I trust Severus Snape completely. Okay? What could he say at this point? Could he say anything? I mean, we get more information in book 7, right?
It could just be end of discussion, table it, move on at this point.
Okay. Why doesn't he reveal to Harry now what is revealed to Harry at the end of book 7?
It kind of ruin it, like,
True.
knowing Harry, you probably end up doing something bad and kind of mess up the entire plan.
True, and destroy the plot. Okay. Why else?
It's not,
Not talking about plot, but within the world of the story. How difficult was it to get Harry to understand the prophecy is meaningless?
Incredibly.
So how difficult would it be to get Harry to believe the truth about Snape?
probably even more than what it's going to take that.
What does it take? Harry has to see it. He has to experience it by going into the pensive. That is what it takes. Why? Because what do we learn? I don't mean the end. I mean, what do we learn about early young Snape in that memory?
He was bullied.
Before then,
He was bullied.
what about he and Lily and Petunia?
They knew each other before school.
They knew each other before, he and Lily knew each other before Hogwarts. They were friends.
Snape was the one who told Lily she was a witch.
Opposite side of the track, so to speak, right? Because Snape grew up on the wrong side of the tracks. I think the implication is Snape's boyhood home is Spinner's End. You don't get that implication about, Lily. We know James's boyhood home is probably where? Godric's Hollow. Okay? Harry isn't ready to understand the full truth yet. Okay? So, Harry talks with Dumbledore about, Trelawney was just in the room of requirement trying to hide her sherry bottles. She heard Malfoy whooping, celebrating, etc., etc. Why was Malfoy whooping and celebrating? He got the vanishing cabinet to work. Okay? So, Dumbledore takes Harry off to the cave on one condition. What's that condition?
Harry obeys any order Dumbledore gives. Emphasis on that word, any.
Yeah. You do everything I say. Okay? So, they go off to the cave. They find the basin. They get past the Inferi and such. Okay? And Dumbledore sees the basin. He's like, really? Okay. Harry offers to drink the water, the potion. Dumbledore says, no, I have to do it. Hold on. Page, that's 566, 67, 68, 569 or so. Harry asks, why can't I drink the potion? Probably 570. Dumbledore says, because I am much older, much cleverer, and much less valuable. What is the much older? Why say that? What's a possible reason for saying that?
Harry has more life in front of him than Dumbledore does.
Dumbledore's kind of saying, my days are at an end. Let's go all Jesus-y, My hour is at hand, almost. Much less valuable? What would the wizarding world in general say about that? Who's more valuable? 16-year-old Harry Potter or 100-and-some-year-old Albus Dumbledore, who defeated Grindelwald, who's also defeated Voldemort, They probably go, let's keep with the old guy. Sacrifice the young one. So, Harry promises. Dumbledore starts chugging the potion. Okay? And as he chugs, he starts to scream, saying things about, it's my fault. No, don't kill them. Don't harm them, etc., etc. No, not that. I'll do anything. Kill me. Okay? Harry, this one will, sir. Just... They empty the basin. Harry grabs the locket. They get back in the boat. They make their way back to Hogwarts, Hogsmeade first. Last page of the chapter. Before they get back to Hogsmeade, Dumbledore says, he gives a great sigh. He leans against the cavern wall. They've just gotten out of the boat. And he says, I'm weak. I don't know that this is an illusion, but I think there are a lot of parallels between Lord of the Rings and the Harry Potter novels. This is like Gandalf at the Bridge of Khazad-dûm, right? Because what has he just done? He battled the Balrog. Back at the chamber, he put the spell, the counter spell, the counter spell, and then he spoke a word of command, okay? And he's wasted. And then he has to really fight the Balrog. Well, Dumbledore is similarly wasted, okay? Then we get the lightning-struck tower. At the very end of that chapter. Harry tells Gandalf. Harry tells Dumbledore, don't worry, sir. And Dumbledore says, I'm not worried, Harry. I am with you. What does that imply? Kind of. I'm not saying literally, but it's suggesting this idea that Harry's going to somehow protect him. Okay? So, chapter 27, we see the dark mark. Okay? He tells Harry, go find Snape. All right? Don't speak to anybody else. Do not remove your cloak. Harry's like, Snape? Really? Why does he want Snape? 2 reasons.
Number one, Snape's the potion. Well, was.
Snape's the potions master. What can Snape work up?
The antidote.
An antidote? What's the other reason?
Snape's known the plans.
Okay. What's happening to Dumbledore at this point?
He's trying to find him.
He's dying. For 2 reasons. What's the first one?
The ring.
He's been dying since Harry first saw him last summer. When he destroyed the ring and he got the wound on his hand, what's been happening since then? That's been spreading. We're going to see in one of the memories. It's getting worse. How long do I have? About 9 months, meaning end of this school year. That 9 months is up. What else? The potion. The potion has just done what? It's sped things along quite a bit. Okay? So why does he ask for Snape? Spinner's End. Remember the chapter? The unbreakable vow? We don't know that yet. We only come to know that because of book 7. Okay? I'll explain that when we get there. So, Harry goes and gets Snape. Dumbledore meets whom on the top of the astronomy tower? Draco. And they have a long conversation, right? Long and drawn out. Maybe a little bit too long. Why is Draco there? To kill Dumbledore. We finally find out what the command charge was that Voldemort gave Draco. Okay? So we also now know what it is Snape agreed to do with Narcissa, witnessed by Bellatrix. He was supposed to aid and protect Draco, and if Draco was unable to do the task the Dark Lord gave him, to do it himself. Right? So, Draco says he's got Death Eaters in the castle. They've gotten past the magical defenses. Okay? And he's going to do the deed he's told to do. And Dumbledore essentially says, you're not going to. Let's talk about your options. This is plus 39 or 40 pages. Somewhere around 593. Okay? He says, I'm about to kill you. He goes, you're not going to kill me. You can't kill me. If you were going to kill me, you'd have done it by now. You would have done it when you first disarmed me. So Draco disarmed Dumbledore. How? We've not talked at all, unlike my usual classes, about Expelliarmus. Okay? He used Expelliarmus. Dumbledore lost his wand. Okay? So what does Dumbledore ultimately tell Draco that Dumbledore has over Draco? Or Draco is under Dumbledore's what? Mercy. What's he mean? We talked about mercy before. Mercy means somebody else is in your power to do something to/with. And you do the kind of the gracious thing. You don't pronounce judgment, you give mercy. You let them off. Dumbledore is saying, you are at my mercy now. How so? We don't understand at this point. We don't understand until we get to the end of book 7. Okay? So, we see Fenrir, Greyback come up, Werewolf. We see a couple others whose names I'm not finding right now, and I don't remember off the top of my head. Electo? The Caro twins? Both of them or just one of them?
Both of them.
Okay? And Snape. Last page of that chapter. Taking way too long. There stood Snape, his wand clutched in his hand as his black eye swept the scene from Dumbledore slumped against the wall to the 4 Death Eaters, including the enraged werewolf and Malfoy. Severus, Dumbledore says. The sound frightened Harry beyond anything he had experienced all evening. For the first time, Dumbledore was pleading. Snape said nothing, walks forwards, gets Malfoy out of the way so that you now have, Dumbledore's slumped against the wall, sitting. Snape walks forward, he moves all the other Death Eaters out of his way so that he stands right in front of Dumbledore. He gazed for a moment at Dumbledore, and there was revulsion and hatred etched in the harsh lines of his face. From whose perspective? Harry's. Harry sees revulsion and hatred. From Harry's perspective, that's directed at Dumbledore. Book 7, is it? Severus, please. Avada Kedavra. Jet of green light. And what happens? See, when this book came out, a lot of people thought, oh, this is different than every other time Avada Kedavra is used. Every other time Avada Kedavra happens, what happens to the person? They drop to the ground where they are. Spread eagle, eyes wide open, look of utter shock on their faces. Okay? The one possible exception is Cedric in book 4. But the only reason there's a possible exception is because of that one part where we find out Cedric is now 20 feet away from Harry, even though when he was killed, he dropped at Harry's side. That's not 20 feet away. That's an error in writing. What happens to Dumbledore? He's blasted into the air. I partly think Rowling is already writing for the films. Like she's thinking, ooh, this will be a good special effect. We can, hangs suspended beneath the shining skull and then falls to the ground. Okay? Harry thinks he has to get to Dumbledore. So he fights off people. Harry fights off Snape. Okay? Harry calls Snape a coward. Around 6:02, 6:03, Harry tells him, fight back. Why is that important? What is Snape not doing? He's not fighting back. He's just defending himself. Even after Harry calls him a coward. Stoop, blocked again. You'll never learn. And again, blocked again and again and again until you learn to keep your mouth shut and your mind closed. Potter, notice, even while Snape is fleeing Hogwarts, what is he doing?
Giving him advice.
He's teaching. He's still teaching Harry. Harry tries to use Sectum Sempra. Snape's pale face, illuminated by the flaming cabin, right? Because Hagrid's under attack, was suffused with hatred just as it had been. You dare use my own spells against me, I, the half-blood prince. And it probably, at that point, I kind of imagine Harry feels like he needs to hurl. Because he's been using Snape's spells all year long. Okay? So, Hagrid and the others come up. Harry explains. Snape killed him around 6:07, 6:08. Hagrid, you couldn't have. Harry says, I saw it. You couldn't have. Harry, I saw it, Hagrid. In other words, I was right there. If you've seen the film version, Harry couldn't have seen it because he was beneath the floor when that happened. Okay? So, last page. Dumbledore's eyes were closed. Every other instance, when somebody's Avada Kedavra, their eyes are wide open. But for the strange angle of his arms and legs, he might have been sleeping. He notices what else? There's a little trickle of blood from his mouth. Nobody else who has Avada Kedavra or suffers that has blood coming. Why is Dumbledore different? Well, when the book first came out, there's this big theory on the internet. The internet was fairly new, and it was Dumbledore's not really dead.
Oh, yeah.
He's mostly dead. Princess Bride, okay? This is all part of a ruse to make Voldemort think Dumbledore's finally gone and now he can fully rise to power and everything, okay? And then book 7 came out and it was pretty clear. No, Dumbledore's really dead, okay? The Phoenix Lament. They have Dumbledore's funeral. We hear Fawkes somewhere out in the distance crying, singing, and we never see Fawkes again, okay? Page 615. Harry's there, McGonagall's there, Pomfrey's there, Flitwick's there, Hagrid's there. Molly and Arthur are on their way, and McGonagall says, Harry says Professor Snape was involved in some, notice, wonderfully ambiguous and benign and passive. Harry, Snape killed Dumbledore. We all wondered. But he trusted, always, Snape. I can't believe it. Lupin. Snape was a highly accomplished Occlumens. We always knew that. What does Lupin mean? He tricked Dumbledore. What did Harry say in A Very Frosty Christmas? How do we know? And Lupin's response is, we know because we trust Dumbledore. In other words, we don't know. We believe. We trust Dumbledore's judgment. Okay? Harry saw Snape kill Dumbledore. Therefore, Dumbledore's judgment must have been wrong. And if Dumbledore's judgment about Snape must have been wrong, what does that open the door to?
Who knows what else he was wrong about?
Okay? McGonagall. But Dumbledore told me explicitly Snape's repentance was absolutely genuine. Tonks says before that, I thought Dumbledore must know something about Snape. Okay? McGonagall, he had ironclad reason. But I thought he wouldn't hear a word against Snape. Okay? They keep talking back and forth. Okay? Lupin says, next page, it isn't your fault, Minerva. We all wanted more help. We were glad to think Snape was on his way. Harry, so when he arrived at the fight, he joined in on the Death Eater's side? McGonagall, I don't know how it happened. It's all so confusing. Dumbledore told us he would be leaving the school for a few hours. Remus, Bill, and Nymphadora were to join us. All seemed quiet. Okay? And they keep talking. Hermione says, she and Luna were outside Snape's office. He burst his way, Flitwick burst his way into Snape's office. We heard him saying that Snape had to go back with him and help, and then we heard a loud thump, and Snape came hurtling out of his room, and I was so stupid, Harry. He said Flitwick had collapsed. We should go take care of him. What did Snape do to Flitwick? Hit him with an impedimenta charm, or something.
But doesn't seem like the kind to pass out with a fright, though. Even if he may only be, 2.5, 3 feet tall.
Okay. What did he not do to Flitwick? He didn't kill him. If Snape were really a Death Eater, would he have any compunction about killing anybody? Lupin. I saw him run straight through the barrier. I tried to follow him back, etc., etc. Notice, what are they all doing?
Pointing out what they did wrong and they could have done better.
Okay, pointing out what they did wrong and what they could have done better. And they're each looking at the interactions they each had with Snape and doing what with those?
Blaming themselves?
Partially. They're taking those little interactions, which are all partial, right? That is, they don't have the full story in terms of all of Snape's actions. They don't have, when police try to create a case or prosecutors try to create a case against somebody, they create a timeline so that they know where that person was all the time. They don't have that. They get the snippets. They get the pieces of the puzzle, but not the full picture. But what are they doing? In their minds, they've got the picture all complete. What's the complete picture? Snape killed Dumbledore. Because that's the picture Harry has given them. Okay? Notice how quickly and easily they accept this version or this picture. Why? Because Harry saw it. He was there. What has Harry not told them, though? Why didn't Snape kill Harry? The Carroll twins tried to when Snape's
He
leaving.
said it was Lord Voldemort's job.
Okay? No, the Dark Lord wants to do that himself. All right? So, what happened to Bill? very briefly. Good grief.
Attacked by non-transformed grayback.
He got attacked by a werewolf, which means there's a possibility he could become, but his face is now disfigured. He's no longer handsome like he once was. And we see Flim show why she's not Flim, but the flower of the heart. What her name means. Fleur. This is, I don't know, 6:24, something like that. You thought I would not wish to marry him? Or perhaps you hoped? Fleur says, her nostrils flaring. I mean, she's pissed. What do I care how he looks? I am good looking enough for both of us, I think. All these scars show is that my husband is brave. And I shall do that. And she knocks Molly away. I mean, pushing Mrs. Weasley aside. Why? This is my man. This isn't yours. What should Molly and the other Weasleys do at that point? Way to go, Fleur. I mean, she just endears herself to all of them. Okay? So, White Tomb. They're thinking Hogwarts is going to close. I mean, you can't have Hogwarts without Dumbledore. Okay? The White Tomb. We have the burial. We see the little guy dressed in black and such. Okay? They're talking about, Harry, Ron, and Hermione, about Snape and his father, his mother, how he's the half-blood prince. His mother was Eileen Prince, notice, even though he has the last name Snape, half-blood. Mother was the witch. Father was like Voldemort. Very like Voldemort. Okay? And we're told at the end of 37, 38, somewhere around 639, 640, paragraph that begins, over at the Slytherin table, Crabbe and Goyle were muttering. Into that paragraph. Harry did not believe that Malfoy would have killed Dumbledore. He despised Malfoy still for his infatuation with the dark arts. What is infatuation? How is infatuation different than love?
Infatuation's more of a unhealthy obsession.
Unhealthy obsession?
Passing.
Louder?
It's usually passing.
It's usually passing, it doesn't last. Infatuation is really about me. It's about how my so-called love for the other, whatever that other is, dark arts, person, thing, makes me feel. The warm fuzzies or whatever. Okay? Notice, Harry thinks it's an infatuation. It's not lasting. It's not long-term. It's not real love. But now the tiniest drop of pity mingled with his dislike. Well, what did we see back in Prisoner of Azkaban? If there's the tiniest drop of pity, aka love, love and the dislike cannot what? They can't coexist. One has to win out over the other. That's why Voldemort couldn't take possession of Harry, because Harry's like love incarnate. Okay? Patronus, chosen one, Messiah, as I put down. Where, Harry wondered, was Malfoy now, and what was Voldemort making him do under threat of killing him and his parents? What does that question really mean? What is going on in Harry's mind and or heart? What is that question showing on Harry's part for Malfoy?
A little bit of remorse.
Remorse? It's pity growing. It's like Malfoy didn't know what he was getting into. And where did Harry see that?
From the tower.
And before that,
In the bathroom.
in Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. I can't do it. Okay? So, Harry has this talk with, Ginny, and there's all the other people going on, and we hear the words of the funeral, and suddenly Dumbledore's gone, and there's this white tomb. Okay? Harry thinks, white tomb, how many pages? Come on. 43. Harry thinks somewhere around 6:45, I would say. Paragraph that begins, and then without warning, it swept over him. What swept over him? Dumbledore's dead. He ain't coming back. Okay? It was important, Dumbledore said, to fight and fight again and keep fighting, for only then could evil be kept at bay, though never quite eradicated. Did I ever put up here this quote? It's 4. All that is necessary for evil to thrive is for good men to do nothing. It's a quotation attributed to Edmund Burke, kind of the founder of conservatism, so to speak. A lot of people have used that in speeches and such, and we're actually going to see an instance of it in the next book. But notice, Dumbledore said it was important to fight and fight again, and maybe that will keep Voldemort at bay. But he couldn't let anybody else stand between him and Voldemort. In other words, Ginny, go away. And Ginny's like hell. Ron, Hermione, go away. Yeah, right. No. So what does Harry say he's going to have to do? Or what he thinks he's going to do? Second to the last page. I thought I might go back to Godric's Hollow. Because Harry says, I'm not coming back to school. What's the point? Okay? Hermione, we knew you were going to say that. We're coming with you. Harry, I'm going back to the Dursleys once more. Why? Because Dumbledore wanted him to, and he remembers the previous year when Dumbledore said, let Harry come back once more. Because when he turns 17, all bets are off. Okay? So he says, I've got to find them. Them what? Horcruxes. I am going to, somebody, I think it was you, or it might have been my second class, somebody asked, if we don't finish Deathly Hallows, can we meet the day the final is assigned, according to the final schedule, to finish discussing Deathly Hallows? And I'll send an email out. Yeah, we'll do that for anybody who wants to. Nobody's required to, will not affect the grade at all. More than likely, your final will already be graded by then anyways, okay? So, Deathly Hallows with 8 minutes to go. Start Deathly Hallows with 8 minutes to go. Notice it starts with 2 epigraphs, okay? These are writings that come before, that's what the epi means, before the real material. The first one is from Aeschylus, the Libation Bearers, and the second one from William Penn. The Libation Bearers is the middle play in a trilogy called the Oresteia by Aeschylus, one of the earliest Greek tragedians. And the Oresteia is a trilogy, 3 plays, the first one called Agamemnon, the second one called the Libation Bearers, the third one called the Eumenides. Okay? Agamemnon is about the death of the great Trojan, or the great Greek hero of the Trojan War, Agamemnon. He comes home from battle, all right, after a long time, and his wife and her lover kill him in his palace. Okay? His son is not Orestes, is not there at the time. Word reaches him, and the Libation Bearers is about Orestes killing his mother for killing his father. There's a long family history of intra-family killing in the, what are called the Atreides, the sons in the family of Atreus, right? Which we're not going to go into. So this little passage is about how the children, Orestes and his sister Electra, will bring judgment on their father's killer. Okay? That's why there is a cure in the house and not outside it. Okay? What's the house here? Hogwarts. The magical, the wizarding world. What's the cure? From the children. Harry, Ron, Hermione. Okay? The next epigraph from William Penn, More Fruits of Solitude, William Penn, Pennsylvania. Okay? Death is but crossing the world as friends do the seas. They live in one another still. In other words, death is not what? It's not the end. Okay? Crossing the seas would be like our taking a plane somewhere. Just because the other person is physically gone, does that mean they're quote unquote spiritually gone? I don't mean the soul in hell or the soul in heaven spiritually gone. I mean the soul separated from yours. Because one thing about friendship is what? There's a connection of souls. That gets elevated, exaggerated if you want, in marriage. Because then, according to traditional Christian theology, the souls literally join. Okay? So, in this divine glass, what's the divine glass? Love. What's the glass? It's a mirror. Okay? In this divine glass, lost my place. For they must needs be present that love and live in that which is omnipresent. In this divine glass, they see face to face, and their converse is free as well as pure. This is the comfort of friends, that though they may be said to die, yet their friendship and society are, in the best sense, ever present because immortal. That is essentially what Paul is talking about in Hebrews 12 with the reference to the great cloud of witnesses. Okay? So what are we being prepared for in both those little epigraphs? Death. And lots of it. Okay? Dark Lord ascending. Two men appear out of nowhere. Okay? They walk down the avenue. They're going where? Malfoy Manor. Who are the two men? Snape and Yaxley. Okay? They go, they meet with the Dark Lord. Okay? And he invites them in. Where does Snape sit and where does Yaxley sit?
Snape sits at Voldemort's. He's actually right hand.
He sits at his right hand. That's symbolic. That means all of his trust, all of his faith is placed in Snape.
That must have made Bellatrix real happy.
And Malfoy, it's his house. Where's Malfoy sitting? Down at the end of the table. In the little kid seat, you know. Like Thanksgiving with big people and the little people. And he's, okay? We hear them talking about their plans. Okay? Around page 5. They've attacked the ministry. Well, take that back. They've infiltrated the ministry. And Yaxley says, maybe around 4 or so, that he has succeeded in placing an imperious curse upon Pious Thickness. Who's Pious Thickness?
Is he the head of magical law?
Yes, at this point. Okay? So Voldemort says, that's a chance, or that's a start. Scrimgeour must be surrounded by our people before I act. Scrimgeour is still Minister for Magic. Okay? They keep talking. So, Thickness, as head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, he has regular contact not only with the minister himself, but others. Voldemort. As long as our friend Thickness is not discovered before he has blanked the rest. Converted. Not imperious. Converted. That is religious language. It's nothing else but religious language. Converted them to what? Voldemort's cause. Or bad faith. Malfoi. To their faith, as it were. The faith in Voldemort. Okay? And it is 9:24, so we still have 1 minute. What do we see happen in this chapter? Two things. Two really important things. One, Snape's rise, right? Because he's placed on the right hand. Okay? Concomitant with Snape's rise is Malfoy's fall. And what do we see Snape do? What do we see, or what do we see happen to the Muggle Studies professor who's hanging in the air? Severus, please, Severus, help! Avada Kedavra. Snape. We see her killed, okay? In Memoriam. We don't have time to start this. We'll start with In Memoriam on Tuesday. I'm going to try to get us done in 2 days. More than likely we won't. So we'll probably take that third day on the assigned date for the final.